Blink. One, two, three. Bop, beep, bop, bop. Razzmatazz, tazz, 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 tazz. Smush, 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 mew, yo, 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 yo. Ooh, 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 ooh. I don't know if you realize this, but most men, as they age, lose their chin. Okay. First off, it just looks like there's I got a little schmutz there on my neck that goes directly into my lower lip. Ugh, can't even talk straight. First up this week, we have Beware the Eye of Odin, number one. This is written by Doug Wagner and drawn by Todd Odlin? I gotta look at him. Doug Wagner's name sounds familiar to me, but that just could be Tim Odlin. That could just be because he shares the last name with famed 2000 AD scribe John Wagner. Tim Odlin's name also sounds familiar, and in fact, both their names sound familiar to me together. Um, but I couldn't tell you why. I picked this up, and I'm making it a hot pick of the week. I think this was my store pick also for the week because it's a Viking story, and who doesn't love a Viking story? And like most people who are me, most of your Norse mythology knowledge comes from obviously the 1984 film Lady Hawk. I'm kidding, of course. From Thor comics that I read growing up, and my like any subsequent reading I've done on Norse mythology, which I have done, is largely colored by that. I still picture all the Larry Lieber versions of these gods, and that's not. I don't. I'm not complaining, but it is kind of a narrow thing. Neil Gaiman wrote a book entitled Norse Mythology. My sister bought me for my birthday one year, and I still haven't read. Not on purpose. It's just like most books that I buy end up in this black hole of books. But I did read some of the comic adaptations that they've been doing recently of that book. And comics didn't feel like they were adding much to it, but I am looking forward to reading that book. One of my favorite sort of aspects of Norse mythology, though, that doesn't really come up in the Marvel comics very often, is how Odin crucified himself on the world tree and gouged out one of his own eyes to, I'm probably remembering that wrong, in order to gain all, so he become the All Father. He gained all wisdom that way. And I always like when they draw Odin with an eye patch. Like I think it's not a thing if they don't, but I that's eye patches are cool. Nick Fury has proven that time and time again. And I don't know that aspect of the Norse creation myth has always seemed. I mean, it's very grisly, which is probably why I like it. And so, since this plays directly into it, also I really and I this is true in my own work especially. I love a title that is a complete sentence. I mean, it is an imperative, so the subject is implied, but this is a complete sentence. I'm an English major. Also, this week from upstart publisher Marvel Comics, I have the new Fantastic Four number one. New. Well, 30 years old, but let me back up. In I think it was 1990 or 91. I used to remember that. I think it might be Fantastic Four. No, I can't pull it anymore. It's in the 340s. I want to say there was a story arc. Gosh, I don't even remember who was doing it regularly at the time, or who even wrote this. There was a 3-issue story arc in the Fantastic Four where the Fantastic Four were off planet on a grand adventure as they often are, and a sudden calamity needing their attention came up on Earth, and so these 4 heroes banded together: Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, and the Ghost Rider. Oh, are they also the most popular characters of the 1990? Yes. That's just a coincidence. It was fun. They formed a new team, and it was drawn by Art Adams, who did draw. Wait, it was drawn by Art Adams, who did not draw this comic, but Nick Bradshaw drew this cover, and Nick Bradshaw is Art Adams Jr., which used to bother me, but now I really like the fact that he when he when Bradshaw first broke on the scene, that was my immediate criticism was he looked too much like Art Adams. But further than that, and you can still kind of see it. He and Art Adams does this too. Draws very square jawed characters. Even Ghost Rider. Well, I guess Ghost Rider would be the strongest jawed of them all, since his jaw is actually visible. Um, but it grew on me. I really like Nick Bradshaw's work, and he really only does covers anymore. He doesn't do interiors as much anymore. He did Wolverine and X Men with Jason Aaron, which was really fun. But anyway, I'm digressing. What do you know about that? So this is the reuniting of the original team. Not only the original team, I think this might take place back then because the Hulk here is this is Mr. Fix It. This is when he was Gray Hulk, who also worked as a bouncer at a Las Vegas casino. You don't see that in the MCU very often. Hence his shirt and tie. And it was more. It went back. It was during the Peter David run, who also wrote this. Um, when the Hulk originally was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, it was more of a werewolf situation where he would Bruce Banner return into the Hulk at night, and then at sunrise he would become Bruce Banner again. And they very quickly failed on that to go with the anger thing, which they stuck with for most of his existence. It's been a long time since they've done that. I think not since Bruce Jones, which would have been 20 years ago, did they do that kind of this TV show, The Incredible Hulk, kind of Hulk, that people are familiar with. So I think this is probably because also Ghost Rider is very clearly Danny Ketch, not Johnny Blaze, who is currently the Ghost. Actually, I think they're both currently Ghost Rider, but the chains and the braces and the spikes that's Danny Ketch. Johnny Blaze just wore a leather jacket, and even the way they draw Spider-Man and Wolverine here looks. I mean, it's getting Bradshaw to draw it and drawing him in these costumes is clearly meant to invoke that time period. That just could be because that's where they became the new Fantastic Four. The new Fantastic Four, 32 years ago. But yeah, like I say, it was a lot of fun. I want to say that was during Walt Simonson's run on the Fantastic Four, although I would have swore. I mean, he definitely was on the book in the 80s, but it might have been Peter David wrote the original. Now I'm thinking about it. It was very clearly, even to me as a 12-year-old, it was clear that the regular creative team just needed some time off. So they took 3 months off, and Art Adams and whoever wrote that book. I should really do a little more research before I start babbling. And then blah 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 blah. Also this week, Punisher War General Blitz #1. So Punisher War Journal when he was playing high school football. As you can see, this is current Punisher because he's got his current the hand logo on. So this is drawn or written by Torrin Gronbeck, and I may be pronouncing her name wrong. Who is something of a protege of Jason Aaron's, who's one of Marvel's top shelf writers and has always been a favorite of mine. Had not read a whole lot of her stuff, but she did write the recent Jane Foster and the Mighty Thor comic. And she's written a bunch of, she wrote a bunch of stuff for War of the Realms and King of Black, which are more recent events, usually credited with Jason Aaron. And to be honest with you, I like, it was just like, those were books that I didn't really feel I needed to have. But now that I've actually read some of her work, I'm looking forward to reading more of it. The Punisher is also, like most of the stuff that she's written, that I'm aware of anyway, has been in the Thor books. But Jason Aaron is also writing Punisher, so that she's writing the second monthly Punisher series is not a surprise to me. From what I was reading, this series is, I think it was in Tom Brevoort. Tom Brevoort is an editor at Marvel Comics, and he's worked there since the mid 80s, late 80s. I want to say for as long as I've been collecting comics. And he does a newsletter that I highly recommend. I don't remember what the link is, but his last name is Brevoort. Very What is that? Swedish? Look that up. Brevoort. That's Dutch, right? South Africa. It's Afrikaans. Uh, but he's the editor on this. I'm pretty sure, and he said it was more. No, now I don't remember. But he was trying to make it sound like it wasn't just another monthly Punisher book. That it was going to tie into the ongoing Punisher series, but you wouldn't have to be reading that to be able to follow this. I just love the Punisher, and honestly, Punisher War Journal was the second Punisher title, and I just always like the title. Whenever they bring this is the fourth Punisher War Journal now. Well, Blitz is part of the title also, which I can do without that. But back when the Punisher had his first monthly comic, which started, I want to say, in 87, 86 maybe. Nope, 85. I got it. He had a miniseries in 84. The monthly series started in 85. And that was Carl Potts was writing most of those scripts. And I'm pretty sure this was his invention. Although it might have been Conway's for all I know. Jerry Conway's the original writer of the Punisher, original creator, co-creator. This was back when comics were always narrated, though, and usually by the protagonist, and there was captions in every panel. And so for the Punishers, it would say Punisher War Journal, and then the date, and then he would narrate the story, and it was so stupid, but I loved it. It was so funny to me as a kid to picture, still now, to picture Frank Castle going out and mowing down drug dealers and gangbangers and all sorts of other street criminals with his trusty M16, and then coming home. Dear Diary. I mean, I know it's a war journal, but Dear War Journal, it still sounds. Journaling is not something that I picture soldiers doing, especially not Frank Castle. This was why or it's not why, but I'm kind of glad that isn't a thing anymore, and maybe they'll bring it back for this. I don't know. But so the Punisher was popular enough that in 1988 they started him a second title, which I believe at first was every other month, and it was slightly more expensive, and it had better quality paper and printing, I believe, and that was also one of Jim Lee's first gigs, so the art was really good. It was called the Punisher War Journal, and yeah, I loved it. And I don't know, even though it's a silly device, I like how it sounds. And it just kind of makes more sense for a comic book title. This is the Punisher's War Journal. And this is Picks of the Week. And this is Picks of last week. Okay. Oh, I gotta go get my laundry in about 6 minutes. Can we do it? I think so. Alright. Last week I read Bill and Ted Roll the Dice. This was a lot of fun. James Asmus knows what he's doing. And this is, I'm glad that I recently watched both Bill and Ted's movies. I guess it was during quarantine, so about 2 years ago. But it was in anticipation of Bill and Ted Face the Music. I had not seen Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. I think I definitely saw it in the theater with Eric Muniz when we were in 8th grade, possibly 9th grade. And then I'm pretty sure I watched it once more later in high school. But then I had not seen it for 20 years. And it was fun. It's not as good as the first one. It never is. But it was fun. And then, so this takes place right after Bogus Journey. So I was like, okay, I kind of remember most of these characters. But they do call back to some stuff that I had to look up and go, oh yeah, that was in that movie. So this is as I was talking about last week, this is a D&D sort of oriented Bill and Ted adventure. That's all. Bill and Ted is I don't think I talked about this much last week. Forgive me if I did, but Bill and Ted has always been a favorite property of mine, even though Wayne's World ended up being way more popular. It's a very similar thing. Although there's definitely some very obvious similarities between the two, but they were also very distinctly different. And the main thing is that Bill and Ted was like a science fiction thing. So that just automatic. I loved Wayne's World too, but Bill and Ted's was more. They went to hell. I mean, if Wayne Campbell had ever gone to hell, which he will, uh, for destroying Tia Carrera's career. That's not nice. It wasn't that much of a career to begin with. But I was Bill and Ted were because I mean Bill and Ted takes place in San Dimas, California, which is not far from where I was born, and is very typical of Southern California. I come to think like I claim San Diego as my hometown, but I really tend to think of it less as a hometown and more as a home region. I was born in Los Angeles County. I grew up in San Diego County. They're the same goddamn place. One is smaller than the other and smells less like piss all the time, but only by a hair or two. I'll let you guess which one it is. It might not be the one you think it is. Um, it's so yeah. San Dimas is very. So I went to high school with a lot of these idiots, and plus I was in high school when these movies came out, and they were my friends and I used to reference them all the time. I still will say something strange is afoot at the Circle K if something strange is indeed afoot. Bonus points if it's actually at a Circle K, which I don't even know. I haven't seen a Circle K in a while. There used to be one across from my last apartment, but that's now like 7-Eleven. Anyway, good times, fun times, good times, great times. This was also really fun. Do a power bomb. Number one, this is written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson. It's really good stuff. It's not exactly what I was expecting. It's more of a Into the Dragon type thing, I want to say. I could just be saying that because I read something else recently that was very Enter the Dragon. Oh, right. But it's more, so it's not Enter the Dragon. It's more that kind of kung fu story where the student goes to avenge her master. So I believe it's I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a very famous wrestler. She dies in the ring. Her daughter grows up wanting to be like her. And Johnson's already a hell of an artist, and he's clearly big into wrestling. That's a hell of a panel. I mean, he's like Stoko or one of these guys, or I was just talking about him the other day. Guy who does Shaolin Cowboy, you know. They have very similar styles, but I feel like Johnson doesn't take nearly as long. Now I'm saying that, but I think the last title he did was a year ago. So what do I know? Yeah, this was a lot of fun. I was also I think I might have mentioned this last week too, but yeah, I kind of not been into wrestling for a long time, and reading this again made me remember, like, oh yeah, it is great fun. I don't know that it's a sport. I don't know that it's a show. I remember when Robert Wilson told me in fourth grade that wrestling was fake, I was crushed. Santa Claus, Schmanta Claus. But now you're telling me that the Hulkster is not going to run wild all over me, or you, or whomever. I really want Hulk Hogan to do that. As much as I liked Hulk Hogan because he was the biggest wrestling superstar when I was a kid, he was too easy to like. He was such a face. I like the Bushwhackers. That was, and I also remember like Brutus the Barber Beefcake was a favorite of mine too, and usually because he kind of played second fiddle to Hogan, and I just kind of like those guys. Tend to be more interesting to me, the sidekicks. Um, I feel like I don't have any. We'll just move on. Wrestling's fun, and this comic book is fun. You should read it. And then also, I read The Bone Orchard Mythos: The Passageway. Going to the Bone Orchard, man. This object that I could not identify last week is in fact a drone. Which, when I realized that, and when I flipped back to the cover, oh, that's very obviously a drone. I feel like a dummy. So, the great news is that it's more super good Andrea Sorrentino art like this. I don't know. It's definitely, well, it's okay. I was kind of of the mind that this was going to be a similar series to the Reckless books that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips have been doing for the last couple of years, where they were all connected but could easily be read individually. You didn't need to really know everything. And I feel like this is less that. I think it's more like it's going to be kind of a sequential thing. It is. Is it a complete story? I want to say it is a complete story. I mean, it definitely gets weird, and it ends in a place where you're like, "What?" But it's also more supernatural than more of a horror story than the Reckless books are. Where the Bone Orchard is horror, Reckless is crime, so they're not going to play the same. I enjoyed it, but I'm honestly kind of waiting to see what the next one is like to see if I want to continue. Because as good as it is and as fun as it was, it just I don't know. It feels like I mean it's only $18. I don't know. I'm kind of reserving judgment a little. I'm sure it'll turn out great because when these two get together, it's always fun. But I got to go get my laundry into the dryer. So thanks.